How is it that we find ourselves surrounded by such complexity, such elegance?
The genes of you and me, the genes of you and me, we're all made of DNA. We're all made of the same chemical DNA. We're all made of DNA.
Hi, you're listening to DNA Today, a podcast and radio show where we discover new advances in the world of genetics. From genetic technology like CRISPR to rare diseases to new research, we have you covered. For a decade, DNA Today has brought you the voices of leaders in genetics. I'm Kira Dineen. I'm a certified genetic counselor and your host. I am thrilled to share a brand new podcast that I co-produce, the Patient Engagement Program by n-Lorem. The podcast just launched 2 days ago, so I wanted to share the pilot episode with you. This podcast focuses solely on the needs of nano-rare patients. These are patients that have unique pathogenic variants, aka mutations, that affect 30 or less people in the world, and sometimes it's just one person. The host of the show is Dr. Crooke, who will be a familiar voice to you if you are a longtime listener of DNA Today. He was on episode 141, where I picked his brain about nano-rare diseases. He's a scientist, physician, entrepreneur, and the father of antisense technology. Dr. Crooke is responsible for more than 40 drugs in development. This episode in particular is very touching and enlightening. I hope you both resonate with it and learn from it.
Hello, I'm Stan Crooke, founder, chairman, and CEO of n-Lorem. Welcome to the n-Lorem podcast series. This is a podcast series that focuses solely, exclusively, on the needs of nano-rare patients. That is, patients that have a unique mutation that affects only them, or are a member of a tiny group of patients of less than 30 worldwide. Today, I'm privileged to have two guests. Luke Rosen is a parent of one of our patients, his 7-year-old daughter, Susanna. Luke has had 3 successful careers. He is an actor whom you have probably seen in shows like Law and Order and Orange is the New Black and a number of other movies and media. And then when he learned that Susanna was ill due to a rare genetic disease, he founded a patient advocacy group, which he continues to lead. And in the process of learning about Susanna's disease, he became such an expert that he was asked to be vice president of patient engagement at Ovid Therapeutics. Recently, however, he's taken a leave of absence from Ovid to focus exclusively on Susanna, his family, and his foundation. Our second guest is Dr. Wendy Chung. Dr. Chung is the Kennedy Family Professor of Pediatrics at Columbia University Medical Center, where she wears a large number of other hats, such as a precision medicine resource leader in the Irving Institute, chief of clinical genetics, and many other roles. Wendy received her MD degree from Cornell University Medical School and her PhD in genetics from Rockefeller University. She is a renowned genetics scientist and a medical geneticist, and is unusual in the breadth of diseases and patients that she's dealt with, but has a significant focus on neurological diseases and in particular autism spectrum. She has contributed groundbreaking genetics research and continues to care for many patients. She's won numerous awards, and she is consistently recognized as an outstanding educator and for her commitment to medical and graduate education. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Stan.
Really, it's great to have you. So, Luke, I'm going to begin with you. Why don't you tell us about life before you had Susanna?
Thanks, Stan, and then thanks for having me here. It's a real pleasure. Before Susanna was Nat, our 10-year-old son now, who was 3 when Susanna was born. So it was very, that feeling of being a new parent and running all over the place and not being certain if you're doing things right or wrong. And I traveled a lot more than I do now, and so I was. Like you said, I was an actor for about 20 years, and we had a very nice, sort of life on the west side of Manhattan, and we had play groups, and we were we were very fortunate to have Nat, and of course very fortunate to have Susanna, that's before it was kind of normal. It was the old normal, we like to call it, because we have a new normal now, but it's the old normal.
How did you and your wife Sally meet?
Sally, we met in college. We both went to school in Connecticut, and we met at Connecticut College, and she was dating a good friend of mine. He's not a friend of mine anymore. Yeah.
One of those, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. And is she a performer too, or does other things? Or
Sally is an incredible actress. She's wonderful, but she doesn't care to admit it herself. Sally writes cookbooks and is incredible in the kitchen, and Sally is a wonderful writer, and she's since slowed work down a lot. She cares, both of us care for Susanna pretty much full time, but Sally is the person who keeps the engine running in our house for sure.
So now we're going to be talking about topics that are deeply personal and deeply painful, I'm sure. And so, Luke, I very much appreciate your willingness to share all that with us. And I fully expect to cry somewhere during this interview. And that is exactly as it should be. Our hearts should go out to people who are dealing with issues, particularly issues that affect their young children. So, Luke, what happened? How did your life change after Susanna? You've already begun to tell us that, but I'd really be interested in how you learned when you first began to worry that there might be something wrong. What you had to go through to get a diagnosis, and then what you learned about the diagnosis and how you proceeded from there.
Yeah, it was a very. I say this. I've said this before, and parents know that if parents have more than one child, for the first kid with Nat, I feel like I always say this to you, Wendy, but with Nat, if he had a little rash, we would panic and run to the emergency room or something. Not quite, but with our second, with Susanna, it was kind of like, oh, she's on her own timeline. She'll get there. But we started noticing there were a couple of different moments where we noticed that things were really not going in the right direction, and it was Sally actually had Susanna in the bathtub, and we used to do this thing where we would say to the kids when they were in the bath, when they were babies, kick, 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 and we made a little song of it, kick, 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 and Susanna just couldn't kick. She couldn't move her legs up like that, and Sally said, I think something's really wrong. And so that's when we went to first our pediatrician and then our neurologist, and it became really clear that there was something significantly wrong with her health. And the neurologist at the time told us that we should, they were just very stumped. We did a lot of tests, MRIs, EEGs, everything. And the neurologist said that we should get genetic testing. And if Sally doesn't like me saying this, but if you're over a certain age, and we lived in Harlem at the time, so the kids were born at Columbia, and Columbia is where we went when someone fell and got stitches. But if you're over a certain age when you're having a baby at Columbia, it's what do they call it, a geriatric pregnancy or something? And part of it is that you have to get a certain amount of genetic testing done, very minimal, I now know. But so I thought when the neurologist, I said, oh, we've already done that. I didn't have a science background or don't have a science background. I said, we've already done that. We've had the genetic testing, but they said, no, there's a more extensive way to do it. You have to enroll in this research study. And so one night we were in the hospital, and for a couple of nights for something that was going on with Susanna, and someone came in, and we enrolled in the research study, and quite some time went by until we finally were able to hear that she had a mutation in this gene KIF1A, and we didn't know what that meant at all. There was a moment when I was walking with her up Amsterdam Avenue, and she had very low muscle tone as a baby, but her legs shot up like planks and were stiff, and she was scared and crying, and that was the real moment where I thought something's horribly wrong. And so Sally and I, after we heard the diagnosis, KIF1A, we didn't know, it was accompanied by a few research papers that did exist, and they were very scary papers to have. They said things like early death and brain atrophy, and just these words that were really hard to digest. And I got this information before Sally did, because and so I came home, and I had this window of time where I knew, but Sally didn't know. And I wanted that window of time so to keep going, because I knew that what I was just going to have to say to Sally and tell her what I had just found out and show her these papers was going to be, and it was quite literally heartbreaking. And then we started researching. We didn't know anything about this, so we started doing our own research, and somebody said, you need to find Wendy Chung.
So Luke, how old was Susanna when you first began to suspect there was a problem?
Susanna was 3-4 months old when we saw something was just a little off, but nothing that was incredibly concerning until she was about 1.5. Yeah.
And then, so how long was it before you found your way to understanding that she had this unique mutation in this gene you knew nothing about?
How long was it from when
when you first went to your pediatrician to when?
Oh, yes, I know you mean that. So unfortunately, it took a long time. It took about 3 months for us to get the results back from, and that was because we if we could do it all over again, I would have asked our doctor at the time to just prescribe or order us the test. Instead, being part of the research study that we were in, that took us significantly longer than it would have otherwise. So we had those 3 months were really difficult, because we were just waiting, and we didn't know if we were ever going to find out what was wrong with her. Every doctor we went to told us they had no idea really what was going on. And they could talk about the specific parts of her body. Well, an ophthalmologist would tell us that her eye was moving one way because of one reason, and then a neurologist would say, she's having this activity in her brain for one reason, but then no one could ever give us an exact, really, this is what is wrong. So that was about 3 months of not knowing anything and being really scared.
Yeah, 3 months of terror, and then watching your little child go to terrifying things like MRIs and all that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know what people forget to tell? Someone forgot to tell us when Susanna was getting her first MRI that after, as she was getting sedated, the babies shake a little bit. And the person who was doing that forgot to tell us that. And And as Susanna's eyes were closing, I remember thinking, gosh, I don't want the last thing she sees before she goes under to see me crying, because I was, it was scary, to see that, but it's normal.
HemoShare Therapeutics is dedicated to developing therapies that help improve the lives of patients with rare genetic diseases. HemoShare scientists have developed an investigational therapy to treat methylmalonic acidemia and propionic acidemia. These ultra-rare genetic diseases lead to the rapid buildup of toxins in the body. Patients can suffer from intellectual disability, liver, kidney, or cardiac disease, and other life-threatening conditions. HemoShare is conducting a clinical trial to assess if their drug may be effective in the treatment of both methylmalonic acidemia and propionic acidemia. Learn more about HemoShare and these ultra-rare metabolic diseases in episode 188 of DNA Today. You can also visit hemoshear.com. That's HemoShear.com. PerkinElmer Genomics is a global leader in genetic testing, focusing on rare diseases, inherited disorders, newborn screening, and hereditary cancer. Testing services support the full continuum of care from preconception and prenatal to neonatal, pediatric, and adult. Testing options include sequencing for targeted genes, multiple genes, the whole exome or genome, and copy number variations. Using a simple saliva or blood sample, PerkinElmer Genomics answers complex genetic questions that can proactively inform patient care and end the diagnostic odyssey for families. Learn more at PerkinElmerGenomics.com.
And I'm sure you know now that you actually had a remarkably short period. The average time, according to the UDN data, the Undiagnosed Disease Network data, for a rare one of these kinds of diseases to be identified and genetically characterized, is something like 8 years. And of course, the vast majority of patients are never diagnosed. And so you learned that she had this mutation and in a gene you didn't know about, and you found some papers that told you that things were bad. And so how did your son handle all that?
Well, he was 4, and we try to we're very honest in our family and in our house, but there are certain things that we wanted to protect him from, and he's an incredible person. So he handled it in a way that was, this is just my sister. This is how she gets around. This is how she, looks. This is how she acts. But then there were some really scary times where he had to see some things that there still are. Every month, he sees things that are very difficult that kids shouldn't see, and but he handles things. Well, he's 10 going on 60.
How's Susanna doing today?
Today is a really good day. She doesn't usually make it through an entire day of school. We'll get a call from her aide, her para, who spends a one-on-one aide, spends a day with her. And we'll get a call that she's either had a seizure or a bad fall or something, or she's just, not engaging with anybody, and she's staring off, and the teachers can't get her back to, back.
So she has seizures, and she has muscle control and muscle weakness problems, and attention challenges, and is she having some developmental delays as well as a result of all these problems?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Susanna is she's now started. She could walk several steps just a matter of months ago, but now she started crawling instead of walking, and she spends most of her time in her wheelchair. But she does have, her cognition is certainly not that of a 7-year-old. but she smiles a lot and she's very happy even when we know she's in pain. She's incredible.
Oh, she's beautiful, and that's her life.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be, but it is. And so you got to work like parents often do in trying to understand what was going on with Susanna, and I would have to guess that you felt lost. The vocabulary was basically impossible to understand, and as you learned more, you got more and more terrified, huh?
Absolutely. It was the not knowing, and still right now the just not knowing what tomorrow is going to be like for Susanna is really hard, because every day is kind of an improv, right? She's if she has one night where she has a nocturnal epilepsy more than epilepsy during the day. I mean, she has both, but if she has a night that's filled with seizure activity, then we know her day is going to be really hard for her, so she she's very spastic now in her lower limbs. She also has neuropathies in her hands and her feet, so she is in a lot of pain in her hands, and she'll wake up and in her own way. And Susanna has words. She can express herself, and in her own way she'll tell us that it feels like her hands are burning on the inside, and that's hard to have a kid wake up and yeah.
So you meet Wendy and you have a diagnosis, and my guess is that your first question after that was, is there any treatment?
Yeah, well, we met Wendy because somebody had told us that Wendy was the person who could articulate this and tell us what was happening and maybe care for Susanna. And so I emailed Wendy, and she emailed me back within minutes and asked if Sally and I wanted to come into her office and she could explain the implications of what KIF1A was and meant. And so we did. Early in the morning, we went to Wendy's office at Columbia, and I talk about this a lot, and we were mentioning the elevator ride up there was, Sally and I were really, really anxious, of course, and Susanna wasn't with us, and so it was one of the first times that we were in the hospital without Susanna. And we had this, a moment where we were alone and got to spend time together, but it was, because that doesn't happen. Somebody has to be with Susanna 24 hours a day, all the time. And then when the elevator did open, and this is, I remember this just so clearly, the people who were there, there was a genetic counselor and a social worker and the nurse practitioner. And Sally and I knew that, we were about to hear something that needed an army of people to help us with. And we went into this smaller room near Wendy's office, and Wendy came in and told us, and just very clearly and with this empathy that is really rare, what to expect, and that there's not much known. We could find maybe 15 people in the world that had a mutation in KIF1A, and nobody with Susanna's at the time, and that Susanna, that it was a neurodegenerative disease, likely with a progressive course, and she would probably have trouble seeing, which she does. She has vision problems. Should probably be in a chair. It was that was a hard conversation. I can't imagine ever having that again. But there was a lot of crying, and you mentioned my son Nat, and this is the moment of all of this about Susanna's health and about this diagnosis, and when Wendy was telling us what to, what it was, the moment I remember most and is the hardest thing was I said in the middle of the conversation, how are we going to tell Nat? How are we going to tell Susanna's brother about this? How do you tell the kid this? And Wendy, and Wendy looked at me and said, he's going to be a remarkable young man one day. So for some reason, that's what I remember most about this moment of finding out this devastating disease that Sally had, or that Susanna has, was trying to figure out how I was going to explain it to my son. And then Wendy walked us out of the hospital, and it wasn't just here's the diagnosis, good luck. It was she walked us downstairs through the building and out into it, even right when we got into the taxi, and there was a hug and I'll see you soon. And so we felt like we had this support that I now know not many people have.
Oh, and that's sadly very true. Luke, I want to move to Wendy, but I do want to ask one last question. n-Lorem, what does it mean to you and your family that Susanna's application was accepted by n-Lorem as a potential for treatment?
Yeah, that's another moment that I'll never forget, is when Wendy was able to tell us that. It means everything, Stan, that there's people are fighting for a treatment for her, and that it is actually going to hopefully become a reality, and that we might be able to change the course of Susanna's life. It's really hard. It's hard to watch Susanna's life right now, and to think that there's going to be there could be a treatment for her that would not make it as severe, not make life so hard for her, is just beyond measure. Words can't describe it. It's hard to. It means everything to us. Everything.
And you're sophisticated enough to know that there are no promises of any sort that anybody could make at this stage. So it's hope, and hope for help, I suppose, is the way to think of it. Yeah, absolutely. We are so, the desperation is teeming throughout our lives and our house, and it's a hope for something that we didn't think would ever be there, and it is. So yeah, just the hopelessness and isolation of patients that we are trying to help is detrimental to health. Hopelessness is bad for health, and helplessness is terrible.
That's really well said. It is grinding, and that hopelessness is we're so thankful.
Yeah. Well, we at n-Lorem feel privileged to have Susanna as a patient and to work with Wendy. And, we'll keep our fingers crossed and do our level best, and we'll all work together for Susanna. And I would say that I think every patient should experience the care that Wendy displayed. And sadly, I think you're right, Luke, that in far too few times is that the case. So you are very fortunate in many, many ways in the midst of, a tragic situation.
Did you know PerkinElmer Genomics was one of the first laboratories to offer whole genome sequencing on a clinical basis? Whole genome sequencing can maximize clinical diagnostic yield for patients. With turnaround time of 4 weeks for the proband sample, PerkinElmer's whole genome sequencing test is designed to provide access to additional valuable information compared to an exome. PerkinElmer also offers prenatal whole genome sequencing as well as ultra-rapid whole genome sequencing for critically ill newborns using dried blood spots. The ultra-rapid genome has a turnaround time of 5 days and includes mito, chromosomal CNV analysis, STR-TNR screening, and biochemical analysis. Also, listen back to episode 176 with Dr. Madhuri Hegde, where we explored the power of whole genome sequencing, which also happens to be one of my favorite episodes of DNA Today. And stay tuned for a couple more episodes with PerkinElmer soon. Discover all that PerkinElmer Genomics has to offer at PerkinElmerGenomics.com. Hemashare Therapeutics is dedicated to developing therapies that help improve the lives of people with rare genetic diseases. Hemashare is currently conducting a clinical trial for a potential new treatment for 2 ultra-rare genetic metabolic diseases called propionic acidemia and methylmalonic acidemia. Learn more about Hemashare and these ultra-rare metabolic diseases in episode 188 of DNA Today. You can also visit hemashare.com. That's HEMOSHEAR.com.
So Wendy, I'm going to turn to you now, and we'll try to brighten up the conversation here, maybe. I know your background, and of course, I've admired your work, but I'm intrigued by how you do it. How do you manage every day? Well, talk about clinic day, I guess. How do you manage seeing so many patients who are in positions similar to Susanna?
Well, number one is I'm the one who's on the screen, but there's an army of people behind me. That's the real magic to all of this. And so we have a caring team. Luke mentioned, our genetic counselors, our nurse practitioners, our social workers, but even beyond that, we've got an army of scientists, computational biologists, bench scientists, neuroscientists, both here and around the world, who are all fighting for Susanna and all of Susanna's friends. So as we do that, I think we've learned, it's taken me in some cases 25 years how to figure out some of the things that I do. But as we've done it, we've tried to scale ways to do it and put everyone to work. And so even though the team that I mentioned are, paid people on my team, the rest of our team is actually our families. So families like Luke, and I want to give Luke a lot of credit. He has mobilized a very powerful community of families behind him, and it's together that we get these things done. And as we do this, we all have a role to play, and we all take feedback, and we iterate, and we get better and better as time goes on. And we have partners like n-Lorem, which I'm really good at some of the things that I do, but I can't do what you guys do. And together, it's the dynamic, not just duo, but dynamic. I don't know what 1 million people is, but it's a lot of us all working together. And the hope is that although, what we're doing for Susanna is important exactly for Susanna, the lessons that we're learning for Susanna, I'm convinced scale beyond Susanna. And so it's how can we do this not just for Susanna, but Susanna's friends in KIF1A, other 500 or so neurogenetic conditions that I think about, the 7,000 other rare genetic diseases that we know about, plus the others we're just discovering. I think those are really the incredible opportunities, but it's tough because right now, Susanna is one of very few individuals with exactly her genetic change, and we need to target her genetic change in this case. And so she really is more than 1 in 1 million, probably 1 in 50 million, but that doesn't mean we leave her behind.
It doesn't mean that at all. And, I think you handle these things as I handle them, and as Luke and parents and patients do. And that is, you find ways to take control of what you can control, and find ways to accept those things that you can't control. Otherwise, the process is too destructive. I imagine that rings pretty true to you, Luke.
Yeah, it does. It's pretty hard not to be able to control the outcome of the day, or just what is happening next, and that loss of control and lack of direction, or the spontaneous things that happen in life are really hard. But like Wendy said, we have this community of people who are just so supportive, and it's a lot. There was one Wendy has been kind enough to invite us to speak once in a while, to every year, to her medical students. And this year was pretty awesome because it fell on a voting day, so the kids didn't have school. So Nat and Susanna came too. And I never want Nat to know what the word degenerative means, although he's getting old enough to see that things are changing with her sister, or his sister. But I had told Susanna I wanted to prep her for what was happening, and I said there'll be a microphone that one of us will have, and Wendy brought Susanna, pushed Susanna's wheelchair in, and Susanna came and took the microphone, and she sang a part of the song from Frozen, and it was in front of, I don't know how many students were in there, but it seemed like a lot, and she had this
auditorium full of 200 students all watching Susanna perform.
Well, she's from a family of performers, so naturally she's going to be a star.
Yeah, but yes, she is, but seeing her do that is not something, and I never sell her short. I know she can do anything she wants to do, but there are things where you think about, am I ever going to get to see my daughter do ... And as I was sitting there watching her, even though we were talking to these medical school students, somebody said, "Did you take a picture? Did you record it?" And I said, "No, I just lived it. I got to see my daughter sing a song to a big audience." That was another great gift. So thank you, Wendy.
So Wendy, why don't you tell us about the gene KIF1 and what it does, what the protein does, and why Susanna is sick.
Right. So Susanna has a genetic variant. It started brand new with her. It wasn't inherited from either Luke or his wife, Sally. And the gene itself is a kinesin. It's a molecular motor. So it's responsible for taking things down these very long axons or these very long projections out of neurons that go all the way from her head and the neurons in her head, but also the ones that go through her spinal cord and go down her legs to her toes and out to her fingertips. Those very long, if you think about it, the length you have to go from your head all the way down to your big toe, it's a long way to go. And so those motors are responsible for going a long, long way. And with this, Susanna's motor doesn't work very well. It has trouble in terms of, if you think about a train, sometimes it gets stalls on the tracks, it gets stuck and there's a traffic jam. Sometimes it falls off of the tracks and, it sort of loses its way in that way. And with that, without being able to deliver the cargo of those trains, those cells die. They die over time. And once they're gone, I can't say for 100% sure, but I'm 99% sure they're not coming back. And so as Luke described this is unfortunately a one-way street, and Luke and the families have a very obvious hashtag when you think about it, hashtag stop the clock, because that's what we think about in terms of time is ticking. And once we start, losing some of those cells, they don't come back. Susanna has this neuropathy, or this painful feeling that she has, the burning. Susanna describes it, and some of the older patients have described it for me as well. It's a burning sensation that really hurts. I mean, like deeply hurts in terms of your hands and your feet, and just feeling tight, feeling like you can't really relax or let go. And with that, it's a painful, uncomfortable feeling. And we try medications. We try some of the same medications we use for other patients who have what we call neuropathies or these problems with their nerve cells, but it never really completely goes away. And at times it gets worse than other times. So that's part of it. But we literally, and I know this is hard for you to hear, Luke, so I'm sorry about this, but we literally see Susanna losing cells over time. We can image her brain. That MRI that Luke described, we can look at her brain. We can see parts of her brain that are shrinking, where we're losing those cells and they're dying off. We can look in her eyes. We can see her optic nerve going to her eye. We can see those cells dying off.
Is she losing sight then?
Yeah, she's losing sight. And it's so hard for Suze. I mean, she really is my heroine, but it's so hard for her because she's got so many things battling against her. She has trouble with the spasticity, being able to move, but she wants to be a kid, right? She wants to just play and have fun. And you can imagine sometimes because she's not seeing things out of this, corners of her eyes or seeing them clearly enough. Plus, she has trouble in terms of moving and she has trouble with her balance. She falls a lot more than other kids do. And sometimes when she falls, she doesn't know what she's going to fall into. And so it's just hard. Susanna's broken bones, more bones than her collarbone, her arm. And, when she breaks a bone, it's so hard for her because then she's immobilized and it makes it that much harder for her to get back to where she was. And so she has these, it's sort of declining, but then, it's almost like a big step down and she's got to work to just try and get anywhere close to where she was, but it's hard. Within that, there's also been this other major problem, which is that in terms of in her head, she's just got an electrical storm, the seizures, in other words, that are going on. And again, I hate doing this to you, Luke. But this is no joke. We have just an incredible community, but we've lost so many of our children to this disease, and we've lost them due to some of these seizures, in some cases unexpectedly. And I know that's what scares us to death and I know Luke and Sally are just, if you can imagine, I don't think they've gotten a good night's sleep, since Susanna was probably, 2.5, 3 years old, because we've had kids that we've lost to seizures in the middle of the night. And so literally Luke and Sally, one of them is sleeping with Susanna. In some cases, Luke mentioned Nat. Nat's had even occasion to be the big brother in terms of sort of being the angel watching over Suze as she's sleeping, and in some cases having a seizure or throwing up or having something caught and having to literally be able to make sure that she doesn't choke on her own vomit or that she doesn't have a seizure that she doesn't wake up from. And it scares us because we've had kids that we've lost that way. As Susanna goes through this, as Luke said, we've tried just any number of medications for Susanna's seizures, and she's on a cocktail of medications. It's not just one, but it's a cocktail, and it changes. It's not like you get it and you find the right mixture and you're good to go. It's like you might be good to go for a few months and then it's all over again, trying to figure out what this is and making it so that she's not a zombie, because there are some of these medications that are sedating and then she's just out of it, and that's not a life. You want her to be a kid, but you also don't want to lose her or have her so that she's having so many, we call them post-ictal periods, but times after a big seizure that she's just out of it for that reason. So it's just, I can't tell you, it's a hard life. Susanna has many, I think of them as angels watching over her besides her family. She's got her service dog, Pippin, who's just, it's amazing. I mean, Pippin's I think a great therapy dog for Suze in general, but she's got her aide, she's got teacher, she's got therapist. I mean, it literally takes an army, but even still, there is a team hovering over Susanna 24/7. I kid you not, it really is 24/7 to be able to keep her safe. And I have to say, though, on the other hand, Susanna is just a joy. I mean, it is a joy to see the things when she gets to eat an ice cream sundae or celebrate her birthday or be able to go, it's ice skating, but it's Susanna's form of ice skating at this time in terms of being able to go to the beach and just enjoy looking for shells or playing hockey or doing a car wash. I mean, it's just, I feel like even though I don't get to spend as much time with Susanna under COVID, I get so many pictures and videos that I get to be a part of the extended family that it's that joy that it motivates me and my team to do what we do every day, because it's allowing kids like Susanna to live their richest, fullest lives. And we want to make them actually have those lives. That's the painful part every time we see her take a step back.
Why don't you spend just a minute on how we hope to treat Susanna and why you think it might work?
Yeah. So as I was talking about Susanna and these trains going down the train tracks, Susanna has one version of the gene that's perfectly fine. Those trains, I think, run on time, they run on schedule, but she's got another copy of the train that is clogging things up. It's making a traffic jam, it's causing problems. And so essentially what we need to do, ironically, is get rid of one of her genes, be able to get that train out of the way, let the traffic flow, and be able to maintain the health of those nerve cells. That's a tough order. We don't have, a medication. I can't just say, take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. I don't even have something like the seizure medications. There's nothing we know of currently in terms of just a regular pill that you can take for Susanna to either treat the symptoms effectively or to get at the root cause of the disease. And that we know that if we don't do something to get at the root cause, she will continue to go downhill. With this, the sort of, just to put it in simplistic terms, the ASO that n-Lorem is developing is going to be able to suppress or to be able to prevent that bad KIF1A from being made, or at least decrease it to such a low level that it's not going to cause the mischief that it's causing. It's a tall order, and I want to emphasize this is not a trivial thing to do, because we have to get rid of the bad KIF1A, while maintaining the good KIF1A, because we need those trains to still keep going down the train tracks. We've got a team of people at n-Lorem, and I do have to say a lot of my confidence is built in my history with dealing with another rare disease community called spinal muscular atrophy. And so a lot of the playbook that we've taken for KIF1A is built on the antecedent about 12 years that we had experience with SMA. And that same strategy worked in terms of Stan. You should take a lot of credit for this one, because for this, with SMA, this was our first FDA approved treatment for SMA. And I can't tell you how many children I buried with SMA before we had the ASO treatment that we had with that. And so it was that inspiration that really convinced me that we had a chance with KIF1A. And I don't say it's a guarantee, but we've got a chance in terms of going forward. And it's with that, that I really do think the strategy should work. Scientifically, it makes sense. Stan and all of the other scientists at n-Lorem have just an incredible insight to the chemistry of how this works, and to be able to design what are very, very specific molecules to be able to do this without being toxic, without doing any damage, and to fine tune this in just the exact way that we need. And they've been so incredibly generous to literally donate all of that incredible experience and knowledge in the direction of children like Susanna. And I can tell you, I know a lot of things. I don't know this. I don't know this chemistry. This isn't something that any scientist like any one of us could do just by thinking hard enough, or, sort of working enough of it. It really takes the decades of experience that Stan and his team have. And it's us working together with KIF1A.org, with the other families, in terms of all making this work. And I'm convinced we're on the right road.
I am too, and being involved with Spinraza, our drug for spinal muscular atrophy, was one of the many high points in my long career. But what we're doing at n-Lorem is even more gratifying to those of us who are doing it. And so, the one thing that we have going for us with these nano-rare diseases is they're all genetic. And so once we understand the mutation, we have a potential target. And now with ASOs, we have genetic medicines. And so we can take that information directly and translate it to a medicine that we can use to treat a patient like Susanna. And, to try to do that in 12 to 15 months, start to finish, is a real challenge. And especially in these more complex mutations where we have to be very specific for one form of one part of the 2-part gene system. So it's challenging, but I think the technology's up to it. And I also believe that it has to be scalable. And if we take a commitment, make a commitment to a patient, we have to be ready to treat that patient for life. And we are. And we can do that. We can do it for free. And we are. Again, Luke and Wendy, it's just a great privilege to know both of you. And I want to thank you for sharing all this with us. Before we close, Luke, any final comment that you want to make?
Yeah, I just thought of about 3 years ago, I took this video of our son Nat. Susanna was in her chair, and Nat was teaching Susanna how to throw a coin into into water to make a wish. And he explained it. You have to throw it this way, and then you make a wish, but don't tell anybody what that wish is. And then she threw it, and it got in there. And I emailed that video to Wendy. I said, look at this, Nat's sending, teaching Susanna how to make a wish. And Wendy just wrote back one sentence. And that sentence was, I know what my wish is. And it's my wish too. And Stan and your whole team, I think, you're working so hard to make that wish come true. So thank you.
Wendy, any final comment?
No, just to say that it's not easy. I know it's not easy for Luke and Susanna and Sally and Nat every single day, and we're there behind you. There are different things that we do to support Susanna, and together we're a really powerful team, and I know we're going to be able to get to something better.
Well, I can't think of a better way to close this. We are all in pursuit of something better. Children should not suffer. And so we'll do our best. So I want to thank both of you very much. It's been a wonderful privilege to have you share all this with us. And I'm sure we'll have more opportunities to talk in the future. And I look forward to them being much more positive.
So do I.
Too. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan.
n-Lorem is a nonprofit committed to discovering and providing personalized experimental treatments for free, for life, to patients with genetic diseases that affect 1 to 30 patients worldwide, referred to by n-Lorem as Nano-Rare. Many of these patients progress and die without ever achieving a diagnosis. This is where n-Lorem comes in. They do the impossible by providing hope, and for those that they can help, free lifetime treatment. For more information about n-Lorem or today's episode, visit n-Lorem.org. Any questions can be sent into podcast@n-Lorem.org. Search n-Lorem on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook to connect with us. Please rate and review the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. This truly helps us climb the charts and allows others to find the show. This podcast is hosted by Dr. Stan Crooke. Our videographer is John Magnuson of Mighty One Productions. Our producers are John Magnuson and Kira Dineen of DNA Today. Thank you for listening.
For more information about today's episode, visit dnapodcast.com, where you can also stream all episodes of the show. We encourage your questions, comments, guest pitches, and ideas. Send them all into info@dnapodcast.com. Search DNA Today on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, so you can connect with us there. And a favor, please rate and review the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. This truly helps us climb the charts and allow more genetic nerds like yourself to find the show. DNA Today is hosted and produced by myself, Kira Dineen. Our social media lead is Corinne Merlino. Our video lead is Amanda Andrioli. Thanks for listening, and join us next time to discover new advances in the world of genetics.
The genes of you and me, the genes of you and me, are all made of DNA. We're all made of the same chemical DNA.